So serving on a submarine, I think it did change my uh, feelings on foreign policy and international relations. It certainly deepened my understanding. The submarine community is very instrumental in our foreign policy. It's one of the most unmatched capabilities that the U.S. has, and as a result, it's if we were to go to war, I think it would be a big differentiator. Without going to war, knowing that we have that capability, these submarines that other nations can't match, is a strong deterrent. And so it's something that we use in foreign policy. In Syria, there were recently some missile strikes last year. They had submarines conduct some of those. And, the fact that you don't know where this submarine is, it pops up and then orchestrates that site, it's a little bit of a show of force doing that. They could have had cruisers. They did have, cruisers and destroyers launch missiles. But the submarine force is, just that trump card in a lot of cases. So, learning how that works, how it's influenced foreign policy for the last 50 years was very interesting. I also took some leadership and ethics classes when I was in ROTC and ROTC. And that was interesting to see because I'm coming out of college at 21, and yet I am representing the US government abroad. I represent foreign countries and kind of the face. I'm the youngest ambassador that the country has. And officers have a slightly, higher level of responsibility and really are seen to speak for the country in some aspects. And anytime I put that uniform on, I became, the U.S. government. I was no longer Mark Capo. I was, Lieutenant Capo, and I represented the government. So thinking about myself in that way certainly changed. How I've thought of foreign policy and how I thought of my actions, and all of a sudden you see how politicians behave and you just think, it's a little bit different view when you're closer to that step where you kind of are seen under the same lens than when you're a civilian looking at them. So earlier, there's kind of this low-level background thought that at any moment, if something goes wrong, this ship's going down, and you're not going to make it. It's the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You're weeks from land. It takes a couple weeks to get out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The USS Miami had a big fire in 2013, I think, and very luckily, no lives were lost. It was in port at the time. It cost over $1 billion. I think they ended up scrapping the ship. The USS San Francisco had a collision. I'm not sure how much is public knowledge. I know there's pictures, so I'll stay away. But it hit something in the ocean, the ground. Not it's not a foreign policy thing, but they had, as a result, I think 2 crew members died on the collision. They were minutes away from the entire ship going down. One valve had been closed about 15 minutes before the collision. Had it not, they'd probably have flooded the entire ship and lost all hands. So you think about that, you hear those stories, and it's really a wake-up call that you're in a lot more dangerous situation than you think of. You don't think about it most of the time. It's very much, you come into an office building, it just happens to be underwater, you're doing your job. I'll take that in 2 parts. There's one, just coming back while I'm still in the service. I think my wife can tell you that's maybe the hardest part, is the week after coming back from deployment, because the submarine, there is somebody manning that submarine 24/7, whether it is out to sea or in port. When you come back, you are still responsible for that. The other crew kind of comes in, has to learn the status of everything and take over. But as a result, the first deployment I did, the first day back, I had to spend the night on the submarine. I could see land, I could go up to the surface and see the sun for the first time in 3 months, but I couldn't go on board, I couldn't go home. And so that was very rough. However, after that week's done, once the other crew has taken responsibility from the submarine, it's like summer vacation, except on steroids. You've been trapped under water for 3 months, and now you're home. You've got a lot of breaks. You're given pretty generous. You have to come in and check in, maybe do 2 hours of work, but you've pretty much got the day off after that, and you really enjoy being back. I will say that I always, celebrated by eating all the food that I wanted to on the submarine, but we didn't have. So I usually put on about 10 pounds as soon as I got back from the submarine, and then, the next time deployed, take it off because I'd be working again. So that was while I was in kind of the cyclical nature of submarines, how you have this life where you deploy, you come back, have a good time, then you have to start training again to start your next deployment. When I got out of the Navy entirely, that's, another pretty big adjustment. And I was really scared. I was scared to join the civilian workforce. I was scared to work with women. I hadn't worked with a woman in 4 years because I was on a submarine of 180 men. There are some submarines that have women aboard. The USS Pennsylvania is not one of them. And it was just something that I was a little scared about. I was uncomfortable, not because, I was uncomfortable. I was worried that I came from, this kind of uncouth, unpolitically correct environment, that I was going to offend someone and not know it. Luckily, that hasn't been the case, but that was something that I was concerned about. And in general, women or not, I was worried that submarine culture does not fit. To a degree, it doesn't, but there's a lot of value in what I did, and there's a lot of the leadership that carries over, the ability to do your job that counts. And there are a lot of veterans out there that you don't talk to, you don't think about, and whatever the service is, I typically find some camaraderie with them. And I'm just, attracted to them because they share the same experiences, and, I tend to make friends with them. That really helps that bond. You can kind of relate. So I think that's very important for veterans that are transitioning. Talk to veterans, talk to military members, and accept them. It's not something crazy. These people aren't strange. They aren't different. And there's a lot of them in Seattle. There's a lot in the area. There's Joint Base Lewis McChord for Army and Air Force, but Navy Region Northwest, which is all the different bases, so Whidbey, Everett, Bangor, Bremerton, Kingston. That's the second largest concentration of Navy service members in the country. So there are a lot in Seattle, and yet I don't think Seattle realizes it. It doesn't feel as military as, San Diego, where the base is in downtown. I think as a result, San Diego embraces the military a little bit more, and Seattle doesn't think about it. That's the feeling that I get. Just because you don't see them around, it's not strange, it's not weird. The military, they're good guys, they're normal people. They're just trying to do a job that's slightly different, but they've been working hard and they sacrifice a lot for it. So, don't write them off.